So we're going to predict what happens in 2016, and we're going to have some political talk. And we'll have, like, before we have that mention of what's happening in the race this year, I want to tell you a story from 1984. I was a lot younger then. I was in a room full of people, and this guy starts shouting, and there was a political discussion going on. And this guy starts shouting, "Mondale is going to win by a landslide. Nobody is going to vote for Reagan. Nobody." Now, this took place in Manhattan, and with a lot of liberal people running around. And indeed, like, nobody that man knew voted for Reagan. Just everybody else in the country did. Reagan won by the biggest landslide ever. Now, so what you have to realize, depending on your environment and who you know, sets your view of politics. But New York is particularly different from the entire rest of the country. And I go back and forth to, like, West Texas, which is more like the other type of the country, where, like, the average person owns 20 guns at least. Now, how many people do you know own 20 guns and a pickup truck with a dog in the back? If the answer is 0, you have no idea how those people vote or what they're thinking. And those represent tens and tens and tens of millions of people. And just as David, like, has certain views, well, he has a PhD. And his views are typical of people with PhDs. And that represents exactly 1% of the country. So, like, people who live in trailer parks probably represent many, 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 many percent of the country. And they actually let them vote. So keep this in mind before we, like, get to this discussion. And Manhattan is totally unrepresentative of how the U.S. votes. It's, like, incredibly liberal, incredibly democratic. So, okay, but we'll get to that to the end. First of all, like, here's how we do the predictions. Well, people think I do math and I predict with, like, figures. No, we look in a crystal ball. Actually, we do math. And we project what's going on. So here's the prediction of what's going to happen in 2016. This is what you'll be doing most of the time. And this is with the markets and in politics. Okay, here's the good news. We've got good news. Most asset bubbles have not burst yet, so everyone's happy. We're all happy now. Here's the bad news. Most asset bubbles are about to burst. And this is what it's going to look like. So here's a U.S. predictions. We'll do, like, foreign countries next. The Fed will raise interest rates. They already did this. And they'll go into this cycle. They will get stuck. And it may be this year, may take into next year, sometime 2017, 2 years. That they will go up and they'll have to go down. Now, this is based on what happened in Japan. Japan had 0% interest rates. They had them for a few years, just like we have. Then they decided to raise them. And they raised them, and they raised them a little. I don't think they even got to 1%. They were 0. And then, like, everything fell apart. So they had to lower them again to 0. And that's exactly what you would predict would happen, because the system, after several years, adjusts to those 0% interest rates as a stasis, as, like, the normal state of being. And so when you start raising rates, it can't react to that. So right now, I would say manufacturing globally is in a recession, or if not, is going into a recession. And we're going to deal, in the last talk, we'll deal with that too. And this is going to spread to the rest of the economy. It's showing up in manufacturing. The fact that commodities are so weak, some of the prices are close to the bottom of 2008, which was a major, major, major recession, is like an indication that something is wrong in the manufacturing economy, because that affects globally, not just in the United States, because that affects the price of commodities. There's a lot of other evidence there's problems as well, but that's like the big neon sign that's telling you something is wrong. So we're going to see major bond defaults in energy because of the low price of oil, which we will talk about later some more too, and mining stocks, and commodity stocks, commodity companies in general. That's not all of the bonds, but high-yield bonds are actually crashing. That happened before the stock crash in 2008. It's actually a signal the stock market is going to crash. So you need to, and it's already happened, and it's getting worse. So we also predict there's going to be a lot of bond defaults. High yield means junk bonds. The popular name is junk bonds. These are high interest rate bonds, high risk, low ratings. So, and there's lots of them, by the way. Bank failures have probably bottomed. I don't know what number. They're at some very low number. They're probably going to start rising again this year, 2016. We're probably going to see the first need for bailouts on a smaller scale, not like on 2008 scale. But things of like they shot up in 2008 and 9, and then they've come down and they're plateauing at a very low level. They're likely to start rising again. So we're entering a new cycle for that. We probably have seen the low point in budget deficits. Now, the budget deficit, I mean, you hear this talk out of Washington, it's like lowest in years, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's higher than it was any time before Obama took office. It's gotten right down to like the highest level, or just above the highest level in the Bush administration. So like any time before 2008, that level would have been considered horrendously bad. Now we consider it really, really good. So there's been a big change in standards. So that's likely to have played out, and we're likely to be turning on that cycle also. Now, and that's likely to go 2-3 years, maybe 4 or 5 years, who knows. And the national debt will accelerate. This is saying the same thing, but in choosing other words. I also see there's going to be a rise in civil unrest here in the United States and in Europe. Both are in a powder keg situation where things are just bubbling under the surface and they're about to blow up. And that it may take another year, but I monitor like social media like very extensively and see what's going on. And I've never seen such expressions of anger, maybe like 30, 40 years ago, or above, even before I was too young, like in the civil rights era. I mean, the anger is unbelievable. For Europe and Asia, the economies have been very weak in Europe, much weaker than the United States. And so they're going to get weaker, but I mean, any weaker, they're in a major recession, or at least a minor major recession. China is falling apart completely, and the government's done everything to prop it up with its like paper money games, and it's just the site was not working. The stock market, we're going to see charts later on in the last talk, and Japan is eventually going to just implode. Now, I predicted this in my books like 5 years ago, and even years before that in my blog, and maybe it's not going to happen this year, but it's like on that edge. The debt to GDP ratio in Japan is way over 200%. They have run out of money. They're broke. It's like just a good wind is going to blow them off the cliff at some point, and the entire they will bring down the entire global financial system when this happens. So I mean, it's like the sand pile experiment that I've talked about many times. You like keep building up a sand pile, and you put in one more grain of sand, like one whole side of it collapses. And this is actually a mathematical study. They don't know. It's impossible to predict which grain of sand that is that makes it collapse. So Japan is like that. Maybe it can get a lot more grains of sand, but one extra grain of sand at some point, the whole thing's going to implode. So I see China going off the rails. They already had the beginning of their collapse, as David said. I don't think it's over in the stock market. The stock market actually went down 40%, which is a major bear market. It's really bad. And I agree, that's not the bottom. That's like the first stage. It's going to be much bigger than 40%. That's not enough for a collapse bubble. It needs to be much higher. So the ECB is continuing to do QE. This is quantitative easing. That's money printing. And they keep saying they're going to do more, and they're going to do it for longer. So, I mean, this is, and still the markets are starting to fall apart. This pushes the stock market up, and even though they've said they're doing more, and they're going to do extra, and they're going to do it longer, the stock market is not reacting in Europe. It's not going higher and higher. It's like drifting down. So this tells you that, or tells anyone looking at the situation, that quantitative easing is played out. That they're either going to have to do massive amounts more, or it's just not, the market's just going to fall apart. Everything's going to fall apart. And this is true of all stimulus. It only works for so long, and then it stops working. in every system. It's not just the stock market or investing. I'm also predicting that Greece will fall into the Aegean Sea and never be seen again. Nevertheless, it will still receive another bailout. So Greece has gotten 3 bailouts officially. I actually maintain it's 4 bailouts. And after each bailout, the economy has gotten worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. So, and it's not occurred to anyone that, hey, bailouts are not working there. And, you know, the whole country is in an incredible mess, and it's just getting worse and worse. So something has to give. Yeah, that would be a great place for civil unrest. EU moves closer to breaking apart. That may take until 2017. There are all these anti-EU parties that have arisen throughout the EU. There's one very strong in England, UKIP, which is specifically anti-EU. There was just a French regional election, and the anti-EU party won the first round, and only because all the other parties ganged up on it did it not win the second round. But some of the candidates got 45% in two-way races. So they're edging very, very close. And in the last 5-year race, the previous one, they got 13%. This one, they got 30%. So each election cycle, their strength is gaining. And this is happening, the UK is about 1 cycle behind France. It's also happening in the Netherlands and Denmark. And there's likely to be a huge EU party arise out of Germany very soon. The commodity collapse has been a complete and total commodity collapse has already happened. This is going to affect every commodity-based economy, and that's almost all emerging markets. So they are doing really badly, and they're going to continue to do really badly, and there's going to be a number of defaults, and stock market collapses, bond market collapses, you name it. And it's not just emerging markets, but Australia's in this situation, Canada, Russia, the Gulf states are all oil-producing states in the Middle East. You probably could add Norway as in this situation. So expect the currencies in these economies to be bad, the stock markets to be bad. So it's not someplace you run and buy and hope to make money on the upside. Maybe you want to short them. There may be more money on that side. The Middle East is a complete powder keg. It is most of the time. But this is also getting worse and worse and worse. I mean, if you're paying attention to politics in the United States, you see potential trouble after the next election. And Russia is now in Syria. Turkey is sort of fighting with them and causing trouble for them. Turkey is a member of NATO, so all the Western countries, if they were attacked by Russia, would have to attack Russia. And so this is a very uneasy, unpleasant situation. And the people running Turkey are just going out of their way to cause trouble. So, and there are people, Americans, who want to bring American forces into Turkey, except the Russians are there. So, and they're not just going to leave. There would be big problems if that happened. So there's lots of room for trouble. There's rumors certainly that Turkey is buying ISIS oil and funding ISIS. Turkey is our ally, and it's supposed to be on our side. There's a very good chance it is not, and it's stabbing us in the back. So this is just, you name it, whatever could happen in the Middle East could happen next year. Market predictions, okay, the high-yield bond collapse. This is going to spread to other assets. This happened in 2008. High-yield bonds were the canary in the coal mine that warned that other problems were coming. And they've already had significant problems right now. I think the stock market will have big decline. I agree with declines. I agree with David. And it's probably a 2-year war situation. Won't be done next year. And usually these things take 2.5 years approximately. Like I said, 2 1/4, 2 3/4. So where that bottom is, I would expect it to be in 2017 sometime. Maybe at the end of well, if it started in May, then October 2017, maybe. So since commodities, though, were very, very cheap, it's risky to buy stocks because they're really overpriced. So you should avoid them. But, commodities look like they're at the bottom. That doesn't mean they're going to rally immediately. They may sit at that bottom for months and months and months and months. And they may go a little lower. I mean, saying oil's 34 and it's going to go to 30, well, you know, that's not like a big collapse. It already had the big collapse. So that doesn't mean if it gets there, it's going to go up. It's, you know, it can go up and down, and stay around that level for months. So there's big opportunity in commodities to accumulate them, you know, over time, you know, in the next year. So I also see there's multiple small country currency collapses. Sometime last week, I think, both Turkey and South Africa had a smaller currency collapse on the same day. The same day. These are both. South Africa is a very strong commodity-based economy. Turkey's just like irresponsible with its money. So you should expect a lot more of that next year. A lot of smaller currencies just suddenly falling apart, and emerging markets anyplace. Now this may move over to bigger currencies. We'll see soon. We'll see in the next talk probably. Real estate, I think, has probably peaked in multiple countries, and may stay high or may start going down next year. At any point in time, HFT is a high-frequency trading. Those are computer trading. At any point in time, you could have a disaster, and David pointed out several days where there were major drops. Well, that can happen again, and it can happen several times in 2016. And those drops can be much bigger. They may not be 10% in one day, maybe 20% in one day, or 25% in one day. So this would make people really frightened and scary, and they'd run away from the market. So cash is your safest asset until you get like some sense of direction, with anything, and slow accumulation of buying of commodities would be okay. Okay, I think now we have the presidential race. Here's the controversy. Okay, as I see it, this election has similarities to 1980. I mentioned 1984, which was 4 years later. 1980 was a change election. And what does that mean? Every 30, 40 years in the United States, there's a change election. That means people have gotten fed up with the system. They've just had it. They throw out all the online people and say, give us something new. And the best example of this is 1932, before most people in this room were born, maybe everybody. When Franklin Roosevelt came in, the system of how the economy and government and taxation was done had been a total failure. The Depression had started. People were starving in the streets, literally. So they threw the bums out. They elected it. Roosevelt had a radical new program, new idea, real new ideas. They threw out all the old congressmen, and so that was one of the change elections. 1980 was a change election, sort of to a lesser extent. Reagan actually had totally new ideas. He was made fun of. He said, this guy's an idiot. In fact, the things being said about Donald Trump, now you can go back and see those exact same things being said about Reagan. Worse things, even, in 1979. And in late 79, there was actually a poll in the New York Times, very highlighted, that had Reagan versus Carter. And Carter had 60% in this poll, Reagan had 36%. And the article was Reagan loser, can never win, no one likes him, no hope, over for him, Democrats are going to clean up and keep everything. Well, Reagan won in a landslide, and I actually remember that day, and people looked like they had been hit by a bomb. They had the most shocked look on their faces, how did this happen? Well, if you followed very, very carefully, you would know how it would happen. And that does not mean you read the newspapers or watch what's on TV, because they're not going to tell you what's going to happen. They're going to tell you what they want to happen. So this election was a complete shock. So and the one coming up can be a complete shock, too. And, the change election before that was probably Teddy Roosevelt, not Franklin, in 1904. He also changed absolutely everything. And if you know anything about Teddy Roosevelt, other than what you read in history books, he was a crazy man. There actually are some films of him, and he's shooting guns up in the air and running around, and you go my God, who is that? And he had actually had a great administration, and he's considered one of the best presidents in the United States history. So what we see, if you want to know what's going on, watch the polls in January. I mean, now we've sort of just they don't really count. They're giving you an idea right now what's going to happen. And you just don't want to see what the numbers are, you want to see what the trends of the numbers. The first caucus primary is in February 1st. Your candidate that starts moving up throughout January, they're going to do very well. And even if they're starting somewhat low, they can't be really, really, really low. You know, that's a hint something is very important is going on. So we have to wait for next month to see what's going to happen. But, you know, as of now, there actually have been dozens and dozens of polls, believe it or not. You know, and there are actually sites that have all these polls, and each day they post new polls. So, like, you know, the United States is poll crazy. So based on those, Hillary Clinton looks like she's going to win the Democratic nomination. She may lose a few primaries to Sanders. You know, he suddenly became very popular out of nowhere in, like, you know, June, beginning of the summer. He drew a very big crowd. It's sort of fallen into the background lately. Now, Clinton, though, has all the money and all the top leadership supporters, et cetera, et cetera. Now, she also had this in 2008 against Obama. And, like, she was the shoo-in winner. I want to remind you of this. And she's not President Clinton now. The guy from behind who no one paid attention from early on was Barack Obama. He did not have all the money. He did not have all of the support from big politicos. And he won. So this does happen. You have to be very careful. So right now it looks like Trump is going to win the nomination based on the polls. He's actually way ahead of all of the other Republicans. The last poll he had 41%, and the second person was 14%. So that's the gap. Now the person who was supposed to win was Jeb Bush. He had like over $100 million. All the donor class, the big Washington power brokers, got together, gave him huge amounts of money. I agree with you. He's like, you know, he's one of us, he's going to win, we all support him. And then he does collapse in the polls. Totally collapse. He has 3% generally, 3-4%. And, you know, sometimes he's sixth. He can't even get in the top 5 now. And he's spent $35 million, more than anyone else in the race, by far, and just can't get any support. And this is the classic rule of marketing. You can't sell something to someone if they don't want to buy it. And, you know, no one wants to buy Jeb Bush. So, like, that's it. And then nothing's going to happen because of that. So, right now, Trump looks like he's going to win the primaries. The one thing that would stop that, if you see, like, he's suddenly sinking in January and someone else is rising very rapidly. And, you know, that most likely someone is Ted Cruz, actually. He is second in the polls, and he looks like he's doing all sorts of connections that people don't know about into, like, evangelical Protestants. Now, we have almost no evangelical Protestants in New York City, in Manhattan. We might have 0, actually. They are the largest voting bloc in Iowa. So they don't vote like us. They vote very differently. So you should watch Cruz, too, to see if, like, the donor class and the Washington establishment hate him, too. So he's not their choice. So they wouldn't be happy with this. Now, the GOP leadership, they've attacked Trump. Most of the stuff you've read in it about him is gross distortions. I mean, he never said, actually, a Muslim database. I actually have the videotape of that incident, and I actually have the officially published transcript from CNN. The transcript does not match the tape. I listened to it word for word. The tape consists of him and a voice outside the view of the video. And the questions asked, supposedly being asked, the answers do not match those questions at all. So then the media, now it took me 2 minutes of Google research to find this. 2 minutes, exactly. And every media outlet in the United States says, Trump wants all Muslims registered in a big database. They couldn't spend 2 minutes to find it. They all knew this was a lie. They simply made up this story. So they'll do anything to stop him, and you should do your own research to see what's really being said. Now, there's also, he has trouble with his own party. So he says he'd run as an independent if there's a big convention. This is not likely to happen because, I mean, the Republicans have thought about this, certainly. But, it's just they're not likely to go that far. This actually happened in 1912. Everything has happened before in history. You just have to go look it up. Where Teddy Roosevelt actually had the most votes in the convention, the Republican leadership rigged it for Taft. The Roosevelt people walked out. Roosevelt ran as an independent, and Taft came in third. So, they all know this. The Republican Party was basically wiped out. So, I mean, these people may be, people running the party may be a bit dishonest and not so pro-democracy, but they may not want to, totally shoot themselves on the head. So, the general election, I see, if it's a change election, it will be won by a landslide. And the alternative is a razor-thin margin, like 100,000, 200,000 votes. So anything in between, I think, is actually highly, highly unlikely. So we will just have to wait and see how this works out. And Happy New Year 2006.